Okay, let's take a look here for a few minutes at configuring DNS. The objective of DNS is to be able to resolve resources, obviously. If we're just using fully qualified domain names, www.yahoo.com, what we're looking for is an IP address that gets us to the server that hosts that web page. In Active Directory, what we're trying to find is the IP address of the server that hosts the service that Active Directory needs, and that's what the SRV records are about. Basically, three things that we want to be able to do here: to resolve our own domain records, to be able to resolve domain records in other domains if we need to use a resource there, and to allow other users in other domains within our forest to be able to resolve records in our domain so that they can use our resources. Probably a fourth thing that we want to be able to do is be able to use our own domain if there's a communications problem. So that means that we really want to host our records locally. Be able to resolve resources in other domains. We've said that. One of the first things that I want to do in order to point to myself, obviously, is to go in and configure the NIC, the properties of the IP address, to point to the local address. The easiest way to do that is probably just use the loopback 127.0.0.1. That way, regardless of what is in the IP address slot, it always looks locally to resolve DNS. When I do that, and it's closed, I can now go look at my DNS locations, and I have an MSDCS that is able to resolve domains, but notice I don't have a child domain in here for the child one. I can do that by just simply configuring a new zone, primary zone, Active Directory integrated zone, to all domain controllers, and it's child1.ordway.prv, and allow secure updates, which is what we want to do. I now have this thing, but notice it doesn't have the records that I need. If I go here and configure net stop net logon, stop the net logon service, which is the service that loads all of the Active Directory information, and then net start net logon. With any luck, when I go back here after it gets through starting the service, and hopefully it's doing something, it's at least taking some time to do things. Let me pause this while it's finishing. Okay, it's finished, and I have gone back and used a refresh. DNS does not do an auto refresh, so you'll need to go either to the zone or to the server, right click on it, and tell it to refresh the location. And now that I've run the net start and the net stop, the child one Ordway, it has all of the records that's required for Active Directory in this thing. So I should now be able to resolve records within my own domain. So now we've taken care of one of the objectives that we started out with, to resolve on domain records, to host DNS locally, point to our own DNS. We've done that. We can resolve them. To resolve remote domain records, we need to go to DNS and right click on DNS properties, and for forwarders we're going to do a conditional forwarder. So we're going to do a new for DNS records in the ordway.prv domain. We're going to forward those records to 192.168.5.5, the root server. We'll add that. So anything that not in our domain that's not listed locally on our server that goes to ordway.prv is going to be forwarded to 192.168.5.5, where it can be resolved, or what we're going to do there is to do delegations, and it'll find name server records. So we can just say OK. So now we've done two things: resolve remote domain records, resolve our own records. Now we want to let others be able to resolve our records. In order to do that, we need to go to the root server and log in. And in its DNS, we'll go in here and we need to do a delegation. What we're doing here is delegating the authoritative records to the local site. And this one we're going to delegate child 1. Child 1 is already here. You cannot delegate an existing domain, so I'm going to delete child 1. Do you want to delete it? Yep, and it's gone. And I'm going to right click, new delegation. Next, the delegated domain is child 1. The ordway.prv is provided for me. And then we're going to add the DNS address, the server fully qualified domain name, which was demo.child1.ordway.prv. And the IP address was 192.168.5.25. We're going to add that. Next. And now we have a delegated record. You notice that it is gray, that lists the DNS server for that domain. So that takes care of the third one, which is to let others resolve DNS records for our domain. We did that simply by doing a delegation. We could also have done that by using a stub zone had we so chosen. The only thing it's listing is a name server record, so that if when Reston wants to find something in our domain and it goes to child1.ordway.prv, not listed in the Reston DNS server, and since it's in the ordway.prv domain, it will forward it, or should forward it once he's set up the forwarder, to the root server. The root server then looks at child 1, finds the name server record, a name server being a DNS server, forwards that request, refers that request to demo.child1.ordway.prv. And the DNS, or the IP address, is listed along with this thing, so it will refer it to that location in order to resolve records. So now then, I think we've taken care of each of these. Resolve on domain records, point to ourselves, run DNS locally. Resolve remote domain records, we do that with a forwarder, conditional forwarder in this case. Let others resolve records for our domain, for our own domain. We did that by listing the name server record in the root domain, so that when somebody tries to find a resource in our domain by name, then it's referred to the root server. The root server then refers the request to the DNS server. The DNS server, our DNS server, will then answer the DNS server that requested the resource. So we've taken care of the DNS resolution issues here. Hope this has been useful, and thank you for watching.